Hello, everyone. Greetings. You are welcome to the JMA Connections this Saturday, which is the 7th day of February, the year 2026. I'm delighted to be once more in the studio, and I have promised we're going to have a very focused conversation where we'll be looking critically at the Southern Cameroon's liberation movement. Of course, we are going to have the opportunity to be assessing the gains that we've made in this liberation movement thus far. We'll be looking at the grounds that we have covered. We'll be looking at some of the challenges that we have also faced right up to this point, of the challenges that have impeded the smooth progress of our liberation movement. And of course, we are going to look at some of the strategies that we need to put in place to ensure that we speed up the liberation movement and deliver to our people a free, independent, prosperous, and a democratic Southern Cameroons, aka Ambazonia. And so to do that, I will have on this panel some guests, some individuals who are grounded, very grounded in matters of international law and organizations, in terms of liberation movements, in terms of mobilizing people, and in terms of mobilizing resources to ensure success in ventures like this ones. So without wasting so much time, I'll introduce our guests, and then I'll get the subject matter introduced for us to go. So all the way from South Africa, we're going to be having Professor Carlson Anyangwe, of course, an erudite, a venerated professor of international law, right on this platform. Hello, Prof. Hello, Professor Carlson Anyangwe. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be part of this panel.
Beautiful. Thanks so much. My pleasure. Then we'll also be having Alem Alemanji. Alem Alemanji is, this is a multi-talented gentleman. He is in everything. The world of IT, the world of, management, and in fact, all you can imagine about him. That will be Comrade Alem Alemanji. He's also the chairman of the Diaspora Ambazonian Community, DAC. Hello, Comrade Alem.
Good afternoon to all of you. Good afternoon, Prof. I haven't seen you in a while. Nice to see you strong and healthy. Good afternoon, GMA, and to all our viewers.
Long time no see.
Long time.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm delighted to have you both on this set. It's always a pleasure being able to have, strong heads like yours in the same place. So that gives us the opportunity to get the people of the Southern Cameroons very, very edified about the things that are happening around them, and also gives us the opportunity to look into the future. So that's it. Thank you very much. I'd like to say good evening. Welcome to everybody, to all the people of the Southern Cameroons. I want to extend hearty salutes to the civilian population on the territory on Ground Zero, who are bracing seriously for some 3 days of ghost towns, going from Monday, Tuesday, of course, Wednesday. Monday is the 9th, Tuesday is the 10th, and Wednesday is the 11th. I've seen those announcements flying all over the place because, usually our people want to put up a clear resistance that the entire world should see that despite all efforts to claim that normalcy has returned, or that the people have decided to accept to return to business as usual, but that the people of the Southern Cameroons continue to resist. They know what they want. They want freedom. They want absolute independence. So I'm extending very hearty salutes to our people on Ground Zero. Of course, hearty salutes to our freedom fighters, those that have picked up arms to defend the community and who are standing on the line, sacrificing their lives so we can have a place that we will call home. And so that said, good evening, everyone. I'm delighted that you are here. And if today is the first time you are logging in onto the JMA Connections, please go right ahead and click on the subscribe button and make sure you share the link to this communication and also do personalize so that anytime something drops here, you'll always be the first to know, because when the news breaks, we meet here on this platform to make greater meaning out of it altogether. So you're welcome to this special edition, and tonight's conversation is deliberately sober, deliberate, and unsentimental. It is not about slogans, not about outrage or emotional mobilization. It is not about propaganda, nor is it about romanticizing suffering. It is about evaluation. More than a decade into the renewed liberation struggle of the people of the southern Cameroons, the question before us is no longer whether resistance exists. That question has long been answered. The more urgent and the responsible question at this point in time is what has actually been achieved, at what human, political, and strategic cost, and toward what clearly defined political end. Any movement that cannot periodically submit itself to honest evaluation risks mistaking endurance for progress. Across the southern Cameroons, the consequences of this struggle are undeniable and deeply painful. Lives have been lost. Entire communities have been displaced, schools shuttered for years, and an entire generation forced to grow up under militarization, trauma, and uncertainty. Yet, alongside this devastation, something irreversible has occurred. Political consciousness has been awakened. Fear has been fundamentally broken. And the idea that the existing political arrangement is normal or acceptable has been permanently shattered. These gains are real, but revolutions are not measured by sacrifice alone. They are measured by clarity, coherence, legitimacy, strategic direction, and outcomes. The hard truth is that suffering, no matter how profound, does not automatically translate into political success without disciplined organization and a credible roadmap. This discussion, therefore, seeks to critically examine the actual ground covered by the liberation movement politically, strategically, diplomatically, and psychologically, while continuing without fear or denial while confronting, I beg your pardon, without fear or denial, the challenges that continue to shape and constrain the trajectory of our liberation movement. Fragmentation of leadership, competing centers of authority, the tension between military action and political strategy, infiltration, external manipulation, and the absence of a unified political command are not uncomfortable side issues. They are central to understanding why progress has been uneven and why opportunities have often been squandered. If the struggle is to advance rather than stagnate, these realities must be confronted honestly, not buried under rhetoric or loyalty tests. At the legal and the historical core of this conversation lies an unresolved truth that continues to shape everything else: the non-existence of a valid union treaty, or call it Treaty of Union, between the Southern Cameroons and La République du Cameroun. The 1961 plebiscite denied the people of Southern Cameroons the option of direct independence, and no internationally recognized Treaty of Union was concluded thereafter. This historical denial is not an abstract grievance. It has living consequences, none more symbolically charged than February 11, officially celebrated by the Cameroonian state by the government of Cameroon, mockingly as Youth Day. February 11 is for many Southern Cameroonians a reminder of dispossession, a date marking the moment when self-determination was withheld and dependency imposed. To celebrate that day as youth empowerment while ignoring its historical meaning is seen as deeply insulting, particularly to a generation whose future has been shaped by that denial. So today, with the help of Professor Carson Anyangwe, as I just mentioned, an expert in international law, and Alem Alemanji, a well-informed gentleman, we interrogate these truths not to dwell in grievance, but to seek clarity, responsibility, and a direction. This is not a conversation about hope without realism. It is a conversation about truth before strategy and the strategy before the future. So let us get into this conversation with an open mind. So, Professor Carlson Anyangwe, I'm delighted to throw the first question at you. And in this first segment, we're actually looking at the strategic, political, and psychological milestones of the Southern Cameroon's liberation movement. So, my first question to you is, from your perspective, what concrete political and psychological ground has the Southern Cameroon's liberation movement covered since its re-emergence?
Thank you very much. It must be understood that this liberation we're talking about did not start in 2016-17. You see, that's a mistake many people make. You have to go back to the 70s. Many people do not know, and that's because most of our people do not do any reading about the legal literature and the history of our country. If you went to the archives, if you read books that have been written, you will discover that even in the 60s already, there were already protestations, letters written to the Yaoundé regime, telling them that what is happening is unacceptable, and that if they're talking about union, there must be a review of that because many people don't realize it. There was never any pen on paper or treaty saying we have unified or union. There is none whatsoever. You see, people don't know. Territorial entities do not informally unite. Give me one single example in the whole world where territorial entities have just come together and said, let's just be and live. And I think our late venerable Mola Njoli Tumbe put it very, very clearly and simplified for everybody to see. He talked of Njuba Marit. It doesn't exist. When you have territorial entities, countries, and they desire to unite, to unify, there's always an agreement that is signed. What is the purpose of the agreement? The agreement will say the two parties agree to unify, and the two parties, the conditions of unification are A, B, C, and D. In our case, there's no such thing. It doesn't happen. And when I hear people talking about, we are one country, we are one nation, countries don't just informally come together. It never happened. There's not one single example which anybody can point to today, even in history. That's the first thing. So right as early as the 60s, if you go back and read books and archives, you see letter written by Fonlon, letter written by Foncha, letter written by other prominent Southern Cameroon people to the Yaoundé regime, shouting that what is happening is unacceptable. This whole thing must be reviewed and put on a solid foundation. But as we know, the Yaoundé regime, whether under Hejo, was still under Biya, is deaf and dumb to reason. And so this liberation struggle, which initially, given our background as a people who want to do things like gentlemen, and this is the whole thing. And that's why those initial years of the struggle in the 60s, people never saw them, because they were actually corresponding letters that were written to the Yaoundé regime. Then, as if to mock us, they moved on in 1972, what we all know happened in 1972. Then all hell broke loose. The number of people who wrote this time no longer in private, but in the open, and saying this 72 thing is unacceptable. But again, given the nature of our culture, we still believe we can resolve this thing without resorting to any armed struggle. And that's why many people do not see this. They are there in the archive. They are there if you read books people have written. So this struggle has been going on since the 60s, the 70s, in the 80s, when the whole thing blew up. why would we think, if you look back, many people don't realize that the reason why the SDF was created, and I'm one of the founding members of the SDF, was precisely because of the pathetic situation in which we found ourselves. And we thought it was important for us to give our people a fair deal, to liberate our people, so we can continue to be a people with a sense of belonging and a sense of direction. So the SDF, the formation of the SDF, was to solve that issue. Once again, we opted for a political party because we still believe, in retrospect, I think wrongly, that we could change the regime in Yaoundé to become reasonable people and to think and to do things properly. And that's why the option of the political party was created. That if we explain to the people the difference between what was obtaining the Southern Cameroon, West Cameroon, whichever you put it, want to put it, on Bazonia, to the people on the other side, they, as normal human beings, assuming they are normal human beings, would think through and say, yes, these people are saying something is correct. If we want these two entities to be together, we must put it on a solid foundation. Well, any
Now, Prof,
foundation, what basis?
yeah, Prof, let me interrupt you there
So,
very briefly.
that's
You have said you opened this
after I defined
your
people like
response to this question.
Inca who took over the struggle, and put it on a map, and that's when people began to see, so, oh, things are happening. Things are happening. And then we now move now to the phase which most people talk about when they talk about the struggle. That is 2016-17. The armed struggle which was literally imposed on our people, imposed on us, because we're challenged to say, what can you do? What have you got? And once that
So,
happened,
Prof, can you
it
hear
started
me?
mass killing. When
Prof, can you hear me?
they have no choice. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, now I was I'm taking you a little back to something you pointed out earlier at the start of your response to this question. You dwelt a bit extensively on this issue of a union treaty. Would this be something that is just recently discovered, or is something that have been known all along throughout this? I mean, the struggle of the people of the Southern Cameroons. Highlighting this aspect of the absence of a union treaty. Because I'm saying so because I mean that has come very much into conversation today, perhaps as a new discovery. Is it something you're just
No,
coming to
there's,
realize that there was no
there's
treaty
no
of
new
union?
facts here. This thing has been on. And I say this is because people do not read. So when they go to a little corners and find something, hurrah! Then they start celebrating and have there are 5 moments of glory. And they think this is, well, this is a new thing they've discovered. No, it isn't. It isn't new. We've been through all of these things. Let me just, and even the whole thing about court cases. We've had at least 4 court cases, 2 in the United States, one in the Human Rights Committee in Geneva, one in the United States, and one in Banjul. What are people talking about? And these cases, what has we've often the challenge of these cases are two types, which many people don't realize. The first challenge is the issue of jurisdiction, territorial jurisdiction and subject matter jurisdiction, which is very, very important. And the second one, of course, is framing the case. Because you don't just go to court and throw things. Oh, we've discovered that we don't have a treaty or union. So therefore, court decide whatever thing you want. The court will decide. It doesn't work
Well,
that way.
Comrade, yeah, Prof,
It doesn't work.
thank you. I would like Comrade Alem to react to some of the issues you raised on that question. And Comrade Alem, I'd like you to also outline what you consider to be some of the gains, some of the grounds that we've covered thus far in this liberation movement.
Yes, there are 2 aspects.
Now, Prof, I was
People do
talking
not
to
see.
Comrade Alem. I was bringing Comrade Alem in. I'll come back to you,
Yes.
Prof. So, Comrade Alem, can you pick it up from there?
Oh, okay.
Okay, it's kind of difficult to piggyback off of what Professor Ayangbe has just said, but I'll try to make it a little bit, I like to break it down from an engineering perspective, right? I think that the thing that we can all agree on is the fact that obviously the union was a failed union. In life, there are certain things that are either a pass or fail. There are some exams can grade an A, a B, a C, and a D to evaluate a student's level of proficiency and efficiency, right? Certain exams like driving, you go to get a driver's license, for example, they don't give you an A, a B, a C, or D. You either pass or you fail. When it comes to the, let me say, independence of the Southern Cameroons, it was a pass or a fail process. I think we can all agree that it was a failed process. That union was incomplete. So if something is incomplete, it's not done. So we cannot say that it was a 80% unification process or 20. No, it was an incomplete unification process. If we all agree on that, and I think even Larconi Cameroon members also agree on that fact, even though they might not say that in public, but that means that everything else that stems from that failed unification process, if it is tied to that process, has also failed. So, for example, when you talk about the fact that there was or there was not a federation in terms of a federated state, based on that failed unification, that also means the federation was a fake or was a failed federation. And that's just life. Everything else after that continues to be a failed process. Now, if you listen to what Prof said, this is where we have to be very, very careful because part of being a Southern Cameroonian and part of what is engraved in our culture also led to part of why we played a partial role in that failure. Because certain things were not done right at the beginning, but we felt as that as gentlemen, we can work this out. As gentlemen, we can fix this along the road. As gentlemen, we can address this down the road. As a matter of fact, I think the venerated, he rest in peace, Dr. Bernard Furlong, at some point, if I'm not mistaken, if my facts are correct, had even made a comment when he realized that this thing was about to go south in terms of bitterness. Made a comment that we are outnumbered, right? We have to leave this for our future generation to resolve. And that is where we find ourselves today. So when you keep on piling failure upon failure upon failure upon failure, you have this particular case which is happening right now in the Southern Cameroons. I say that because it's also going to address what you just mentioned, John Bayakuro, the whole idea of, just discovering that there was no union. I think I have an idea of why this is coming up now, for the most part. Now, is it true that is it true or is it possible that there are people out there, and I'd like to give people the benefit of doubt. Maybe again, I'm falling back to that Southern Cameroon culture, trying to give somebody rope until they can hang themselves, right? Trying to give people the benefit of doubt. There are some Southern Cameroonians out there who may just discover today that there is truly no union or no official union or treaty of union between the Republic of
Yeah, comrade,
Cameroon.
and then if I can refocus you a bit, can you point out, like, concretely, can you point out, say, one, two, three, these are some of the things that I think have that these are some of the grounds that I think we have covered, these are some of the things that I think that we've achieved this far, and I think this is what I believe we are building on. Can you get
Yeah,
can you do
yeah,
that?
I'll speed up. I wanted to just tell you because we remember that because of this failure, we have put in a lot of effort. Let me say, for example, we've put in 100% of effort, but we're only seeing 65 or 75% of progress because of we are it's like running a race and somebody is 2 meters, 2 or 3 meters ahead of you, and you are back here. You are trying to catch up before you can win, right? And because of these failures that we have ahead of us, a lot of our progress has also been hindered. That's what I was getting to. Now, in terms of progress, what have we done? I would say that the majority of our progress has been in education and in awareness. Now, when you look at what Prof said between what was happening in the 50s and 60s, this stuff did not just start today in 2015. The advantage of what we're seeing, or the spill out of 2015, is thanks to things like technology, and the world has shrunken and become a smaller space. What people were doing in the 50s and 60s, John Go and all of those, just think about it. Let me give you, I'm trying to break it down so that a simple child watching this video can understand. Imagine that John Kufoncha is going to the United Nations, right? How much time did it take for him to communicate that? And John Bakuro, you have been in this country for a few years. Some of us, when we came here in the 90s, for example, just to write a letter to our parents, it took about 2 weeks by express mail for the letter to go back home. And it took another 2 weeks for him to respond. That's 1 month of communication. But now we live in a world where the internet is pretty much everything is instant, which means that stuff happening in Southern Cameroons today, in 2 or 3 minutes, we will know all over the world. What have we done? What have we gained? We have gained the idea of taking technology in our hands to be able to now explain to the world, the international community, and also to fellow Southern Cameroonians, why is there a problem in Southern Cameroons? What has led to this problem? Remember that people were just seeing, when you have a fever, you say, oh, side effects. The side effects of this was what? Marginalization, poor treatment in Yaoundé, for example, by francophones or anglophone, discrimination. These are all side effects that we were seeing. But people in those days did not really understand what is causing all these problems. The
Yeah, but
root cause of all the
you
problems
notice
is
that
that
Comrade Alem, you notice that when you talk discrimination, sometimes that's why at some point some will point out that there could be an issue of articulation, because at some point people would like to lay more emphasis on the fact that with La République du Cameroon we were marginalized, we were being discriminated upon, we were being this and that, which makes some people think that some on the international scene think that perhaps the solution to the problem will not be, outright independence. It could be more political reform or regime change. So, Professor Carlson Anyangwe, that's why I'm coming back to you on this too. How has this movement shifted international awareness, internal consciousness, and the diaspora engagement over time in such a way that, this kind of perspective gets pushed to the rear, and the focus be on the fact that this is not just an issue of governance, but it's a territorial issue. Prof?
Pardon, I didn't get that.
Yeah, Professor Carlson Anyangwe, I was asking you, how has this movement, because I was looking at concretely, how has this movement shifted international awareness, internal consciousness, and of course, diaspora engagement over time, so that the narrative of our liberation movement is not such that invites some on the international community to rather think that the solution to what is going on could be either political reform within La République du Cameroon or regime change, but absolutely looking at it as a territorial issue.
Yeah, I'll take that question together with the one about what we've achieved in this struggle so far. Now, you notice people must understand how the world functions, international system functions. Once there is a situation in any country, and those who are involved suffer that situation to prevail, the world does not bother. Because as far as the world is concerned, they have so many fishes to fry that they will say, okay, this one, they're fine, so we need to bother ourselves with them. And that's why it has emboldened some of these African countries that have decided to colonize their unfortunate neighbors. And there are four of them, those countries. Two have failed, and two are still on. South Africa tried to colonize Namibia. It failed. Imperial Ethiopia tried to colonize Eritrea. It failed. Morocco had been struggling to colonize the Western Sahara, Morocco backed by some of the Western powers, for example, the United States of America. We all know why, because of resources that are in Western Sahara. The fourth one is French Cameroon, that has, through trickery and all kinds of things, decided to colonize its unfortunate neighbor to the west. Now, to the extent that there is no showing of a revolt, there is no showing of rejection of that kind of colonization. The world is, as far as the world is concerned, the people are happy. Things are fine. And we're not going to go there to try to stir up anything. And that's the attitude of the international community. And you've seen throughout history, when the people themselves do nothing, the international community will do nothing. And even when the people decide to do something, the initial reaction of the international community is to reject the reaction of the people on the basis, two premises. One, as a result of misinformation internally, the kind of thing you are talking about, they frame it, the internal colonizer frames it and says, no, 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 this is just a group of disgruntled people. One aspect of it. Or they demonize that struggle. Nowadays, the fashionable term that I use is what? Terrorism. You know, before then, they were used to, in the French Cameroon context, people don't realize it. You call you a subversive element, that was called. You were subversives. Now, of course, terrorism has now fashionable. So, as a result of that um, discourse internally, remember the people who are under colonial rule, you don't have access to things abroad, outside. It is the colonizer who has, because he controls everything, and therefore seeks to control even the narrative. And so, through his antennas outside, especially the embassies that they deal with, they propagate that narrative. And the world, of course, buys that narrative because they don't hear an alternative narrative coming from the colonized people. So that's one thing people must realize, that it is always a Herculean struggle for a colonized people to try to upset the narrative being put out there by the colonizer.
So,
We Our
Prof,
case
yeah,
is not
Prof,
unique.
I take you right there. So, 9 years down the road, do you have the feeling that the people of the Southern Cameroons have at least made some inroads in this particular area?
Oh yes, oh yes. Like I said, the initial reaction of the international community is to push back and to say, "Oh no, no," because they listen to a narrative at first instance of the colonizer. When the colonizer says, "Oh, these people are rebels," that was the term that was used in those days of decolonization. All colonial authorities called the people fighting that they were rebels. That narrative eventually collapsed in the face of evidence. In our case, too, it's been the same thing. They rushed to the narrative of what? They said this was terrorists. And terrorism had become such a fashionable thing that the world listened. But after that, the big world began to say, no, 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 this issue about terrorism must be made of standard stuff. So we must look into it very critically, especially in the face of gross and reliably attested human rights violations. In our case, you are talking of genocide, mass killings, mass destructions going on, not only one, not only twice, but for years and years and years. Why would we kill people for years and years and years, if not with the intention to destroy them completely? Now, at that stage, at least a section of the international community begins to listen and say, no, we must investigate this thing and find out and know what is going on. And the leadership, the leader provided in this type of new look is often what? Human rights NGOs that do very good work, and they come out to say, no, 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 no. What people are saying is not true. These people are not terrorists. These people are genuine fighters. And they begin to ask the question. Even if you say they are terrorists, why did they become terrorists? That fundamental question has not been answered by the colonizer. Because the colonizer ought to say, if these people are terrorists, then they are terrorists because this, but they cannot say they are terrorists because A, B, and C. Because it will stop at the question of decolonization. So the world is beginning to listen. But like I said, the world listens slowly and acts slowly. It's like justice. There are many crimes being committed, not only various part of it, but in Cameroon, huge crimes against humanity, genocide, But these people have a sense of impunity because the wheels of justice turn very, very slowly. They don't turn quickly. But although the wheels of justice turn slowly, justice would eventually be served. And the perpetrators of this crime know very well that a day of reckoning shall come. And the people who are actually being colonized and are being massacred and ill-treated would perhaps take the Israeli example of the Israelis. Do you know what? After the Second World War, the Israelis targeted all of those who were responsible for the massacre and genocide against the Israelis. Doesn't matter where you are, they went right to Argentina, brought them back. So
That's true.
these are things that happen in the world. The history is not too far. And we have people playing as though this is just David's play. Oh, well, because the international community, because we have the backing of a certain power called France, therefore, life shall be good ever after. It shall never happen that way. At one time, and you can see France even begin to have second thoughts on this matter.
Prof, you are taking us into some very interesting aspects there. We'll definitely come back to them. Let's move a bit to Comrade Alem. And Comrade Alem, I see you shaking your head profusely on those particular aspects. I know, of course, that the La République du Cameroon has made enormous effort, spent a lot of money along with France to paint the people of Amazonia as terrorists. Of course, as Prof says, that has not succeeded. But Comrade Alem, I'm taking you to the ground. What has changed fundamentally for the people of the southern Cameroons on the ground that cannot be reversed, regardless of how this conflict evolves? What is it that when you look at the situation on the ground in the southern Cameroons, you listen to the people, you talk to them. What do you think within these 9 years has changed on the ground that can fundamentally never be reversed? However this conflict evolves.
Before I go there, I'll explain to you why I was laughing when Prof spoke, right? I'm going to translate this into most of you that grew up watching this Nigerian comedian, Gringori. There was a phrase that he would say, which actually was a professional, was an English phrase, but I think he said it in a very funny way. When he said, 99 days for the thief, or 1 day for the owner of the house. Say, repeat again. Say 99 days for the thief, 1 day for the owner of the house. Let me say that slowly. 99
Correct.
days for the thief. So somebody who's out there committing crimes and everything else, you have 99 days out of 100, right? 1 day for the owner of the house, which means that it just takes 1 day for the owner to wake up and do something and catch that thief, right? You, the thief, have a lot of time to do your crime and commit your crime and atrocities. But the 1 day, like when Israel woke up and they wake up, they started getting people right back in Argentina. Now I'm saying that because again, it ties into your next question that you just asked me, GMA. The most powerful tool that our people have acquired because of this particular phase of the struggle is awareness. And I think that also, from what I'm hearing on the ground, a lot of, uh, let's say, let me just talk about it as people from like Rudy Cameroon have a lot more respect now for those of the Anglo-Saxon descent. I'm saying this because certain things that used to happen back in the day, for example, when they say Vul is Anglophone, Vul is that, and the whole idea of looking down on the Southern Cameroonian as a second class citizen or as somebody who is stupid, I think that is gradually, in some aspects and in other aspects, speedily wavering away. And I say this because you can clearly see this, especially in the recent shams of the past elections, where Mr. Chiroma outrightly won. And you notice that when it comes to trying to reinstall him or trying to validate or trying to make things right, make correct what was wrong in that election, you notice that a lot of people from a lot of people from Republic of Cameroon are actually reaching out to Southern Cameroonians to see and to brainstorm with them on how to move to the next level. And I think that because they have seen what we have done in our struggle for the past 9 years, they have seen our track record, they have seen how we move, they have seen how we do our things, and they are beginning to understand that, man, with those guys that we were calling Anglophiles back in those days, we're not actually Anglophiles after all. They turned out to be the smarter ones. They saw this years before we did. They woke up to this years before we did. Think about this. The collaboration that is going on, or the idea of assistance, or the request for information, or the request for how to do A, B, and C and D back in the 70s and 80s was mostly coming from quote unquote Anglophones who were trying to grow and study in the Franco system, right? But now, like we'll say, the chickens have come back to roost, right? Our CV or our resume is now speaking. What people thought was trash has turned out not to be trash after all. And so for me, it is thanks to this particular struggle that we have been able to, I guess, earn some degree of respect. It may not be what we want, I think that unfortunately it has costed lives. Unfortunately, it has taken a lot of time. Unfortunately, the shit, let me use the better language, had to hit the fan for this to happen. But no matter how we were doing in school, no matter how we excelled, no matter how we tried to be nice, like as Prof said, no matter how our culture raised us in order to be proper, that was not enough for us to earn the respect from our
Now,
traditional rulers.
Comrade Adam, I want
That's
to hold
our
you.
struggle.
I want to hold you back to the fire right on that point. I mean, we have also had the opportunity to say that the people have been facing a lot of fire, a lot of stress from La République du Cameroon soldiers, torture, rape, all kinds of things, exploitation, and outright looting. But the people don't seem to be giving up. The people don't seem to be discouraged. I look at some particular aspect, even as banal as the ghost towns. All kinds of efforts have been deployed, even by the members of the CPDM elite who are Southern Cameroonians, to kill the civilian resistance, but it's not going. To what do you attribute this level of resiliency and commitment to the liberation movement by people on the ground who are, I mean, whose daily realities have changed fundamentally, and they live sometimes between running away from bullets, staying in the bushes, or getting arrested and released, I mean, over and over, just like that, and sometimes even being kidnapped by extensions of La République du Cameroon soldiers who disguise as our freedom fighters. What do you attribute this level of resistance?
The the
Uh,
the
the
principal
answer I'm going to give
the
you,
principal
some
purpose or the
people,
principal
people like,
reason for this resilience which you're talking about is the fact of the enemy. When you decide to kill a people, you decide to destroy them, decide to burn down, and this is not just a one-off thing. Continuing, there's a whole continuum about it. Then you are telling people, the people, that you either resist or you perish. And the people have chosen to resist, and resist will continue to resist. It's like the case of classical colonialism, when the colonial authority brought overwhelming force against the colonial people. What happened? The more they came, the more resistant the people were. And this is what we are experiencing. You know, they've tried, the stick and carrot thing. They'll come on there and deceive you. And they say they are doing X, Y, Z. We know that that's just a feint. We know that is just part of their strategy. They think they can now shut the eyes of the people, that people do not pay attention anymore, to give them opportunity to kill more and to destroy more. The people have become very conscious of that. They know it, and they've always known it. They know that the way we are treated requires resistance. And every day proves that. Doesn't matter what they try to do. It doesn't matter the propaganda which they put out there. It doesn't matter what they try to do. And that is the mainstay of our people. They have been the best people who have ensured that we resist to the bitter end. And let me just link this up with the whole question of people saying, what have we to show for all of this? Now, in every liberation struggle, there are two aspects. One aspect is tangible, the other aspect is intangible. People tend to look only at the tangible aspect. Nobody ever sees the intangible aspect, which is the empowerment which people have, which is the resilience, as you just mentioned, what the people have, the determination what people have. This is something, if you had told people some decades ago, that will reach a point where there will be a struggle, and for decades people will be resisting that struggle. People would have said no. And so, where does this resistance come from? It comes from an awareness. The awareness that we're a separate and distinct people. Because you do not go out to kill your own citizens in the way they've been killing our own people over the decades. You don't. So it has reinforced the idea that we are separate and distinct from them, something which we have been saying as academics, but people didn't tend to see. But now, with the kind of violence exercised by a professional army, mark you, a professional army supported by international forces, whom we know. So that has given people the self fine. That means we are separate. No country goes out to kill its own citizens that way. It doesn't happen.
Correct.
It has never happened in history. The only reason why Hitler killed the Jews because the Jews were different. The
Correct.
only reason why a French Cameroon is killing our people is because we are different. We are not part of them.
Yeah,
No
Comrade Adam, you
country
want to chime in
dictates
again?
Oh, Prof just made a point. Like I was saying in the beginning of my response, that what I was going to say, some people will like and some people will not. But I think Prof just nailed on it, right? So what has made our people resilient? If you break it down to what have we done, in other words, what have Southern Cameroonians done to make our people resilient, especially when it comes to like the ghost towns, right? You have the fact of the idea of the education, and also our people see a light at the end of the tunnel. Even a rat, a small cage, if you have a chance of putting a small opening, it may be a little bit far away, as long as the rat can see that opening, it's going to move and try to go there to get out of the cage. And I'm using these examples because, again, I'm assuming that we have 7-year-old, 10-year-olds, or people with a 7-year-old, 10-year-old mentality watching this program. When you
yes,
when you put somebody in a position where he wants to be free, and you show him a way out, he will seek for that freedom. And that's what the revolution has done right now. Southern Cameroonians now, in general, believe, now they may think about it from different strategic points of view, but they do believe that they will one day get their freedom. That is within the Southern Cameroon's atmosphere. Now, also, from a human perspective, I mean, Jeremy, come on, let's call it spade a spade. You talk about ghost towns. Who doesn't want to have 3-day vacation? Eh? So when you have 3 days, Monday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, just naturally, that is the, hey, we can function on 4 days a week and still, build ourselves up and everything. I'm not saying it to put it lightly. I'm just saying that it's also a human
Comrade
aspect.
Adam, you think it's just the thirst for that vacation, or it's still the desire to resist
That's what
oppression?
some, no,
uh,
yeah, I'm putting myself
you,
in that
you,
position. I'm like,
you,
okay, if you do it for 1 month, two
you
months, now you're
resist
doing
for
it
a
for 9 years,
purpose
it becomes
to
part
an
of the
end
system.
which you want to
You're used to it.
achieve. And
You're
that
used to it.
resistance, yeah, would go on
Then
forever, would
there's
go on for
there's
as
the
long as
aspect.
the colonizer is there, it's going to go on.
Yep, there's
So
the
that
aspect
is
like Prof said
that.
from La Republic Cameroon, shooting of people and
Yes,
everything
Adam.
else. By the military doing what the military is doing, right? It just goes
Yes,
to force. And I'll give you one simple example why to prove what Prof just said right now. If you look at the Arab Spring, right? As that was going along, there are very few cases where the military turned against its own people. Why?
exactly.
Because that military man in the Arab Spring is seeing another Muslim and saying, "This is my cousin's wife, sister's auntie," or "This is my friend's
Yes,
in-law," this and that. There is an affiliation, there's an association, there's a brotherhood and there's a
yes,
sisterhood. For
yes,
somebody in the Republic, as a matter of fact, I'll go back to the beginning of our struggle. At some point in time, again, back to what Prof said about our culture, and this is the weakness of Southern Cameroonians, the idea of being so, warming and charismatic. There was a time that we could not even fathom and believe that the military of Liberia was strong. We believed that they were bringing people from Chad. Am I correct? There was a time that we thought that there were Chadians and other nations were bringing other nationalities to come because we could not fathom the idea that somebody in Douala, somebody in Bafoussam, somebody in Yaoundé, in this block of a country that we call our country, would actually take up a military arm, military equipment, and shoot against us. So by them doing that consistently, I mean, John Barakuru wiping out 400, we say this every day, wiping out 400 villages is not something you can do in a well-placed spiritual mind person on his own person. You cannot train a bulu. Let me not go too far. You cannot train a Libya land military person to come and shoot down 500 Libya land women in the farm. It's not going to happen. There's some human part in that person that kicks in and says, "This is my grandmother. This is I cannot do that."
yes,
So by them doing that, like Prof is saying, it just went to fortify and to wake up the Southern Cameroonians, the other 30% that believe that there is some hope that we are really just Cameroonians. No, those guys were reminded and are continuously being reminded of the fact that we don't know you as Cameroonians, we know you as this Anglophone, we know you as this. So that resentment, that pushback went to actually fortify our message, which is that we are two peoples. The difference is that
correct.
we choose to do it the Englishman, Britishman, clean way. They
Now,
chose to do it
Comrade Alem,
because
yeah, we are getting to the end of this first segment. And before we get to the last question on the first segment, I want to throw this to both of you. Is there something in a name fundamentally that can alter the way people look at things? Because I've also seen there's some argument that has been up there, and Prof, you will recall that this came up for discussion at the first conclave when we were in Nigeria, the issue of naming. Is it Southern Cameroons? Is it Ambazonia? Does referring to us as either Ambazonia or Southern Cameroon has, an effect on how the world perceives this liberation movement, or the attitude of members of the international community towards this liberation movement? Who wants to go first? Comrade Alem, Prof.
Let me
Yeah,
go
let me
first.
let, let me
Let
take
me
that
take this
before Alem
question.
comes in. Okay,
Okay, Prof, go
Alem,
ahead.
just let me just take that one because before you come in, the one number of things people must understand: the change of names of countries is a constant in the world. Let me just give an example. The country you call today France was never called France. It was called Gaul. So you tell me, why did they change to France instead of Gaul and just kept that name Gaul? Can I give many examples? I don't want to give many African examples, which we all know. Burkina Faso, Namibia, and all the rest, and Zimbabwe, and Zambia, and Malawi. All of these are changes of names. You see, people do not understand history. Change of names come for two reasons. For countries like European countries that were never colonized by some other thing, they do change names as an act of affirmation of sovereignty. And they're saying, we are changing our name, we don't accept the old name, and this is our sovereign right to do so. Now, when it comes to a country that's under colonial rule, the change of names comes from the fact that it represents a rejection of the colonial name, which the colonials never took part in fashioning. So you had Zimbabwe, so you had Namibia, and during the struggle, who said, no, our country is Zimbabwe. So it means it represents a rejection of colonialism. And those are two reasons why you have these changes of names. And the change of name, I want to emphasize this point because many people appear to overlook. The change of name does not signify a historical continuity of that territorial entity. It doesn't. France did not begin just with the name the time they changed to France. It goes as far back as when Gaul existed, time of Caesar, when it existed as Gaul. So anybody coming up with the idea that because Ambazonia has just come now, therefore it represents a historical discontinuity and has nothing to do with the territory that is involved, is not being honest with himself. Let me tell you one thing which people don't realize, and those who propagate that kind of propaganda. There was never a United Nations trust to call the Southern Cameroons. It never existed. Show me in the archives where you find that. It doesn't. Look at the UN archives. There is no United Nations trust to call the Southern Cameroons. The territory we are talking about is the British Cameroons, which Britain, for its administrative convenience, decided to divide into two in 1924. One part the northern Cameroons and the other side the southern Cameroons, as an internal arrangement within the trust territory that was given to it to administer. And so southern Cameroon existed from 1924-25 to when? To 1st of October 1961. And that territory joined, quotation mark, which means federated with French Cameroon, not as Southern Cameroons, but as West Cameroon. The records are there. They would have kept on saying our people do not read. And even they read, they are so superficial in their reading. So you have what you are claiming now to be the Southern Cameroons. Everybody forgets the area, the whole geographical entity, which was founded by Afreseka in 1858, right up to when the British took over and the First World War. Nobody talks about that. because it's very convenient. Their own history, the notion of history starts from 1884. That's what people look at it, which is very, very strange. Compounding our situation, you call it the Southern Cameroons. And I've had occasion to address that in many, many countries where I've been to and many fora. Because the moment you open your mouth and say Southern Cameroons, they say, oh, why are the Northerners treating you the Southerners like that? Automatically. Then you have now to go into history now. And so, no, the Southern Cameroons, then some who are dishonored college was United Nations Trust Territory, which was the United Nations Trust Territory. It was part of the United Nations Trust Territory. A part is not a whole. So, to make matters worse, French Cameroon had decided in at its own propaganda, its own game which is playing, confusing the world. When you open your mouth of the Southern Cameroons, they say it's Cameroon le Sud. So you are part of the southern part of French Cameroon. Now, for reasons of strategy, decolonization, to get out of this confusion, Dinka wisely came up with this name, Ambazonia, which means the territory on the zone. And many of our people who make a lot of noise do not even realize it. There is a place there in Victoria called Ambas Bay. That is where Alfred Setter landed. The zone on that is what they call Ambazonia, which is in keeping with all kind of state formation. The Germans, when the Germans took over Douala there, what they call Cameroon was confined to the small Douala hamlet. That was it was. So are you going to say because later on you had Cameroon, therefore you ignore that part? So people don't understand state formation and how countries come to exist. You always start with a small entity. In a colonial context, those colonizers then expand their rule. And at expand their rule, they expand the name of the initial area which they gave and start calling it. Cameroon, which refers to shrimp country, that's what it is. Look at the map, they'll tell you. Cameroon means shrimp country, a country of shrimps. That was at that small Douala Creek hamlet. And that's the treaty they signed with those Douala chiefs. So what had that got to do, even let me take even within French Cameroon itself, what had that got to do with the man? What had that got to do with the Bakure man, or the Bamida man, or Manfe man, or the man up in the north of French Cameroon? Nothing. But what the colonizer did was, after establishing that base, when they called up the Cameroon, as them pushed westwards, southwest, northwest, they also expanded that name. It became an elastic name which they expanded to cover the territory which they had. This all colonial powers did that. So the question which I hear people making, wasting time about and talking about, oh, Ambazonia, blah, 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 is what is killing us. The name is what is killing us. No international community knows about Ambazonia. They know about the trust territory of the Southern Cameroon. There was no such trust territory of the Southern Cameroon. And the Southern Cameroon, on 1st October 1961, there was no Southern Cameroon that joined. It was West Cameroon. And that's why West Cameroon existed for 11 years. So that point needs to be clarified for people to understand before they start making unfounded claims about Ambazonia and so on. But if I may just, sorry, if I just may, I was talking about the benefits of what is happening now. You asked me. I told you that were tangible and intangible. I talked about the intangible benefits, which what most people don't see, the resistance, the knowledge that I'm expressed. You have more and more students. I've seen more and more research output on our territory than ever it was in the past 50 years. Go to any university, even abroad, you
Wow.
will see a lot of research output on this. People are digging, people are finding out. They know things now than they ever knew before. So those are intangible things. And the diaspora, the role of the diaspora has confounded the Yaoundé regime. Now, the tangible aspect of it, you point out the tangible aspect would be, of course, you show territory which you now control. And say, okay, as part of this our liberation, look at we liberated one third, one quarter, one of our territory. We're in charge of it, and we
Yeah.
hope therefore to liberate others. Now, in our context, there's something people tend to ignore. Why would you want to take over the administration of territory? Do you have funds to do that? To pay the workers to govern the place? Let the colonizer do it. So the colonizer will bear that burden. But it doesn't mean that the colonizer sleeps well because we are always lurking around the corner wherever the
Wow.
colonizer goes.
That
Even there
was
are
a
so-called
rather
colonial
that was
it's like
really
call them
edifying, Prof. That was rather
what
really
was prefects.
edifying. Yeah,
Those
so I mean,
themselves
I
are
guess
colonial governors. They know they don't have a good sleep. So we'll let them do all the governing, whatever things, and expend money which they're stealing from us anyway to pay our people who are doing all that work, knowing very well that the day of reckoning shall come and I shall pack and go. Let them read history. In all historical situations, it was the same. Took on what happened in Algeria. It was the same in Algeria. In Namibia, was the same. You let South Africans do the job. You let the French do the job, and so on. You focus on driving the people out. And I keep on saying our people. Our job as liberation movement is not to conquer French Cameroon. We don't have any such ambition. We have no such intention. But our job is to make things so difficult that they will find out that their colonization is unsustainable and they'll eventually pack and go. That's a simple strategy. As simple
sure.
as that.
Yeah, Comrade Alem, now you had to come back on the issue of name, and I guess I mean Prof has given us edified us enormously on that. Comrade Alem, you chip in then.
Yes, let me chip in, Jamie. I'm going to try and this is going to be a little bit of detail. So just let me roll with this, right? I'm going to go over here. I'm going to switch this camera view so you can see my this screen over there. You can see the screen, right? Okay.
Sure.
Now, when you look
Yeah.
at, and I think Prof has already hinted about this, I'm going to go in maybe even a little bit deeper, right? This is your Cameroon as it stands today. If I were to walk into a shop in India, or even let's say I were to talk to the president of Bangladesh, or even the president of China, for example, and I'm talking about southern Cameroons, by default, by the human mind, because you have north, you have south, you have west, and you have east. If you're talking to somebody and you say the southern Cameroons, by default, the human mind is going to go like this. This is what you're referring to as southern Cameroons. And I'm saying this because even in the interview that Paul Biya had in, I think it was France with the Ibrahim, what's his name again?
Yeah, with Mo Ibrahim, that was in
More
Paris.
Ibrahim, yes. And he was talking about, but you're killing the people in the southern Cameroon. You know, if you could tell that, yes, even though he's alluding and talking about southern Cameroons, right? But he is looking at it like a north-south issue because that's just how the brain thinks. If you have a Cameroon and you are probably sitting somewhere here in the northern Cameroon and you're fighting the people in the south because they speak a different language, that was the narrative that was out there in the beginning. All right. So officially, Southern Cameroons, that if you're talking to Southern Cameroonians or people that do their research, this territory, this particular piece of land here, whose geographical location based on latitude and longitude is 3 degrees north to 7 degrees latitude, 8 degrees east, 11 degrees longitude. That is this piece of land here that we're referring to, right? The problem is, if I'm talking to President Trump today about Southern Cameroons, I don't have the time to explain to him that this is the piece of land and this is the latitude and the longitude, because by default, he's going to think about it as this bottom part here and this top part here, right? So for me, I think that most people now decided to figure out a way to call themselves when that name I mean, Amazon has been around for a while, but why were people now hanging onto that name to differentiate themselves from Cameroon? In other words, rather than using Southern Cameroon and still sharing that name called Cameroon, the idea was to totally distinguish this because of trying to be able to tell our story in a better way. Okay? And believe it or not, that actually did work to some degree. Now, I'll tell you this. If I am, for example, going to the United Nations and I have something to achieve, right? The name I will use, I know that name has a reference point. They can actually go and reference documentation. They can actually point to it somewhere in their archives. Is the former British Trusteeship of Southern Cameroons, right? I would not use the name Ambazonia because the name Ambazonia is like starting a new file. It's like starting a new case. Let me put it that way, right? If I am talking to Southern Cameroonians, then I would use the name Ambazonia because it's a name that they I would like to use the word jive more with, right? You talk to an Ambazonia and say, yeah, you feel like you have more respect. Is your name? I think the problem in this naming thing is not so much the fact that the name quote unquote was changed, it's how the name was changed, right? There's a certain volume of Southern Cameroonians who believe that because the name Ambazonia was not necessarily done, let's say, in a parliament or by a governing body that speaks on behalf of the people, therefore the name is not legit. And to some degree, there's some truth in what they're saying, right? I mean, we can always say that, yes, we have the right to call ourselves. I, right now, as Comrade Allen, I can also wake up on tomorrow and say, no, I want to call this territory X. And nothing stops me from doing that. Because for me, I have my beliefs and my reasons why the territory should be called X because of a naming issue or to distinguish the name from Cameroon. I can do that. But I've always told Southern Cameroonians the official name of that territory will be proclaimed and be put in stone the day that we get our freedom and we have our governing body. We can choose whatever name we want. So there should not be an argument about the name. Right now, we use the name where we can get more doors open. There are certain situations where the name Southern Cameroons will open doors. In other words, it will get us what we want. There are certain situations where the name Ambazonia will open more doors. In other words, it will get us where we want. I think Southern Cameroonians are smart enough to deduce when to use what name. Now, having said this, let me get back to something very, very important, and this is very crucial, right? From where I stand, if I were to put a box here, okay, and call this Ambazonia, no, the other way around, and call this Southern Cameroons, okay, for me, Ambazonia, based on your name set, it's almost like it's calling it like it's like a subset of Southern Cameroons. Why do I say this? When you say you are an Ambazonian, okay, in our language, an Ambazonian stands for somebody who is technically looking for the uttermost freedom for this particular territory, which exists on latitude 3 north, 7 north, and longitude 8 east and 11 east. When he says Ambazonian, he is looking for outright independence. You will not find an Ambazonian talking about federation. That's my belief. So when someone says Ambazonia, total independence. However, you have Southern Cameroonians who are Ambazonians, but are looking for some sort of either federation or some sort of collaboration with the other part of Cameroon called La Republic of Cameroon. Okay, so this is where to me that whole name argument, and it should not be a topic that should make me and my brothers and sisters from Southern Cameroons be fighting and arguing. I think that if we go back to our cultural upbringing, there should be some sort of respect as to why does Alem choose to use the name Southern Cameroons, and why would John Akuru choose to use the name Ambazonia. So long as we are not quote unquote fighting over the name, because like I said before, that name becomes an official name when we have a governing body or a governing council that represents the people of that particular territory come out and say, you know what, we're going to call ourselves XYZ. But for
Okay.
now, the former let me finish. The former British trusteeship is the name that is, let's say, officially documented in the international books. So therefore, if we're employing the international community, or we're asking for help from the international community, or we're trying to get the international community to understand, or we're trying to get them to work with us, it only makes sense for us to use wherever we go that name Southern Cameroons. However, there are situations and scenarios where it only makes sense to use the name Ambazonia. So if you
Okay.
look at it from that perspective, right, it doesn't make a difference because we are all talking about this particular same area, 3 degrees north to 7 degrees north latitude, and 8 degrees east to 11 degrees east longitude. That territory, nothing can change that. Now, as to how
Okay,
you call
Comrade
the name,
Alem.
me, very important.
Oh, thank you very much, Comrade Alem. I guess from that discussion about the name, there are about three things that come out. The first thing is Professor Carlson Anyangwe just pointed out, even those who are talking about only talk about the the former UN trust territory of British Southern Cameroons. Of course, he points out something which is very fundamental. There is no such thing as British Southern Cameroons at the United Nations. At the United Nations, it was British Cameroons. British Cameroons, of course, and then they
Yeah.
broke it into the southern Cameroons, and then the northern Cameroons is not even La République du Cameroon. It's the part of the British Cameroons that joined Nigeria. So there, if you really
Correct.
want to stay by the books, you don't even talk of British Southern Cameroons. You talk of British Cameroons, then you get specific. And Comrade Allen points out another thing. Using the name Ambazonia or using Southern Cameroons, when anybody talks about Ambazonia, I know this is a pro-independence person. Absolutely. You don't need to go to a soothsayer to understand what this person is talking about. Then the one that uses Southern Cameroons, you may want to say, okay, maybe there's somebody who is still thinking about, a certain one Cameroon with, a federal system and all of those things. But I mean, that is what really comes with those naming. I think everyone gets those ramifications. We'll take the last question for this segment, then we'll take a short break, and then we'll come and we'll embrace the last two segments with supersonic speed. Now, the last question of this segment will be Professor Carlson Anyangwe. Would you say this movement, the Southern Cameroon's liberation movement, has matured politically, or has it remained primarily reactive or reactive to repression? Have we Can we safely say that we've matured politically and not only reacting, to repression or working on the agenda of La République du Cameroon?
No, no, I have the distinct impression that things have stabilized. Periodically, you still have some spoilers here and there, but spoilers have been in all struggles. In France, during the Second World War, you had people who actually were supporting the Hitler and the German this thing. Human nature, very strange. In Algeria, you had the same thing. In fact, in all countries where you have struggle, there are always rear guard people. Sometimes they are called collaborators. That was the term that was used in Europe, or fifth colonists, people who have been infiltrated by the enemy to try and disrupt the liberation struggle. Um, so throughout, this has been known. We are not exception. And the reason why you have fifth colonists and collaborators is because by the very nature of human beings, there are some human beings who are quite happy being slaves. I mean, and there's nothing can change about that. Partly is because of the low esteem that they have of themselves, and partly because they feel they are too lazy, they will think somebody else will do something for them. So you have those categories of people. There's nothing you can do about those categories of people. In Algeria, what they decided to do was to mass deport them to France. If you say, okay, you were a collaborationist, go to France where you colonizer, you said that was a country, go there and stay there. They never set foot there. Up to today, they've not set foot there. Other countries like France executed thousands and thousands of them, those who collaborated with the Nazis. They know it. So you have this in every country. So I'm not bothered about that because even they themselves know that they're fighting a losing battle. They know that they will never win. They know that the only job is just to disrupt, and that disruption is only temporary. And once the leadership of the struggle, even as diverse as some people say, is aware of that, to get on the business of liberation and ignore these people or treat them accordingly. So I'm quite happy that the situation has stabilized. And we have now, even on ground zero, there's a sense of direction about military operations. It is unlike what you used to see before. The more organization, a sense of purpose, and they work according to a certain strategy, like what I just mentioned. Why would they want to take over territory for? That's not their business. Let the enemy run the territory to pay the people. We don't have the money. In any case, we don't have the personnel to who ought to be fighting to turn out to go and start being GOs and prefect and governor. The enemy should pay those people, they should be managing those people, while we concentrate on making life difficult for them to a point where at one point they give up and then go. So I'm quite happy that things have changed. It's no longer the same. as it used to be before. And they can see there's some serenity in which is now. Unlike before, there were a lot of agitation left, right, and center. And so even the diaspora, things have calmed down. And I have a sense that gradually things are going to coalesce. And this coming together, I believe, is because the civilian population back at home, our people, have shown the way by being resilient, by obeying conditionally for how many years now. They are showing a way about leadership, which I think the liberators have seen, armed fighters have seen, and are emulating that. And which I also believe outside abroad in the diaspora, people who are seeing that, and they say, look, this is an example being given here by a civilian population. If they can be so united and they can be so firm and committed, why would we be trying to disrupt things? So I believe that that is going to come. And like I've always said, it might not be immediate, it might not be apparent, but people are going to see. And I believe that people force is working towards that end. And I think then you yourself, Bakuru, you know that there are people seriously working towards that end. And we are not working now all over, we're looking now at even post-liberation. That's part of the liberation struggle, post-liberation, not just liberation. Because the enemy knows, the colonizer knows, that this thing which it is involved in is not sustainable. At some point, it's going to come an end, going to come at an end at some point. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after, or maybe, but it cannot last like this. They know it.
Definitely. Comrade Allen?
I think I'm going to piggyback off of what Prof said. Keep this one short. Um, in the beginning, we always used to refer to, and I think we still do, refer to the struggle as a God ordained struggle, right? And if you think about this, there are forces working in our favor, especially recently, which we have no control over. There used to be a discussion before that we have all these fragments, the Southern Cameroon, Amazonian liberation. Who do we talk to? I think it's time for us to also ask ourselves the same question now that if we want to have a discussion with our Cameroon, who do we talk to? And I'm not saying this as a joke, right? I'm saying this because, you see, be careful when you point a finger at somebody because you have three fingers pointing at you. With what's going on now in the system, you don't even know government. Is there what government are we talking to? Now, as Prof has said in the beginning, when it comes to the international community, they choose the path of less resistance. And that's why, if you notice, when countries were giving their congratulatory messages to the current leader of Cameroon, they had to pick and choose what words to use, right? Because at the end of the day, you are still dealing with somebody or some structure that seems to have some sort of autonomy or some sort of governance over a people. And so you give that structure that respect, because if you take away that structure, then there's chaos. Even though that structure may not be a good structure, right? So I pose myself to the question. I mean, if we're supposed to discuss on the table, are we talking to A, B, C? Who are we talking with? And I'm saying this because bringing back the whole idea of the God ordained, there is chaos going on in that country now that pretty much puts the Southern Cameroon's liberation struggle at an advantage. Now the question becomes, what are our people going to do with that advantage, right? The international community does not make noise before you, the person. If your house is on fire, you need to show action. You need to be putting out the fire. You need to be calling for help, like your man did in Gabon. We have to make some noise. Huh? We have to make some noise. If you don't make some noise, there's nobody coming from Europe or United States or Canada to make some noise for you. And I think our people have made some noise for the most part. Things
Yeah.
may be sounding like seeming to be quiet now, but I think the noise has been made. The
Yeah,
question now
Comrade Adam, you
becomes,
were just at that point of okay, make some noise. I was going to ask you this very quickly. Do you agree? Would also say that the Amazonian diaspora has lost steam?
I don't want to think that we've lost steam. Again, you have to be, careful. I think that we are not as aggressive as we used to be. We are not as directly involved as we used to be. But remember that there are certain elements that have happened, right? So prior to COVID, for example, there was, and it's true for anything in life. When something is new, something is fresh, you have a lot of energy. If you don't, if you don't find ways to keep it interesting or to keep it going, then people begin to, to, let's say, take a back seat burner. Now, the truth be told also that we also have a role to play in this, right? The whole idea of quote unquote fermentation, maybe some disorganization. So a lot of people have, yes, taken a back burner in terms of being proactive or being proactive publicly, right? Prior to, let's say, COVID. And I'm saying this because we used to have rallies, we used to go out to New York, we used to rent buses and do all those things. We used to contribute more money. So from that perspective, as the diaspora gone cold, I agree. I think we have. Also, there are also external pressures coming in right now, especially what's going on with arrests and all these things. These are things that did not exist before, right? So when you look at, yes, there are internal forces and there are external forces that have made the diaspora take a back seat. I agree with that. But that doesn't, I disagree with, with some of that also from the point of view that because I have taken a back seat does not mean that I have left the revolution. No, maybe in 2017, 18, 19, I was on the television, I was on Facebook, I was doing all of these things. That's where my energy was. Now, 2025, I'm a little bit smarter. Instead of going on Facebook and causing ruffling feathers and getting myself into, governmental issues and stuff, I may now choose to be a little bit more humble in the public appearance, but now I am dealing with who I know that can deliver and do things well, much more efficiently.
Oh, okay. Perhaps that
So
brings me to what Prof said
from that
somewhere, that it is
perspective,
not loss of steam. I'm going to what Professor Kasa Nyangwe said. So I think it was in the private
Yes.
conversation that is not loss of steam. Is a change of strategy. That's rather than
change of
going in with the
Yes.
loud groups and all of those things.
Correct.
People appear now to be
Yes.
operating in a very surgical manner, smaller groups,
Yes.
doing things that
Yes.
would direct impact on the ground and
Yes.
bordering to come to
and
very
Yes.
large
just
Yes.
clusters.
And just to clarify, right, it's nothing wrong with that because if we had done it the reverse, it would have been ineffective, right? If at the beginning of this part of the struggle we were just going into our little silos and doing things, it would not have been effective. That big bang, that big presence, that big hoo-ha had to happen, right? So that has
Of
happened.
course.
It has lived its course. It
Yes.
has served its purpose.
Yes.
So now we have to
Yes.
change. Okay, we have to now
Correct.
change everything. Before they were saying shut down the schools. That has served its purpose. It doesn't do us any purpose or any good now to say close the school. No,
Yes.
it serves its purpose. It's time
Yes.
now to change.
Yes.
Now, what I
Yes.
would agree with you though is that the rate at which we change our strategy or the amount of energy we spend to change strategy, I think we can make that more efficient. But yeah, we can work on that.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much,
Yeah.
Comrade Adam. We will
Yeah.
take a
John,
30
just
seconds
let me just
break.
add
When
one
we
minute
come back,
context to that. Yes. You see, the military, when the military go out and they say shock and awe, what that means is the initial, this in the overgamut, overwhelming force initially. But you cannot have shock and awe throughout the whole war. It doesn't make any sense anymore. So the same thing, the diaspora, like Adam says, that was necessary. In fact, very, very important for it to be that way. But as time has gone on, we begin to separate, the grain from the chaff and say, okay, this is the thing. We need to do this. We need to do this in this way. And secondly, remember, our struggle is the only one where you've had our people have been imprisoned in at least 4 countries: in the United States of America, in Norway, in Nigeria, and in French Cameroon. I'm not aware historically of any other struggle where liberation fighters have been imprisoned in that way. I'm not aware of that. So that's a very peculiar situation that has made us okay. We need to re-strategize and look at things and give priorities to this or that and so on and so forth. I heard people talk about leadership contestation, but that has cooled down. That has chilled, because of the chilling effect of all of this, which I've always said. But it doesn't mean that our people, the diaspora, have given up. Quite on the contrary, they are finding ways and means by which they can achieve the same goal, not necessarily by this public. show or protest. Protests have their place, but after a while, they no longer have their place.
Well, thank you very much, Prof. I guess what we're going to do is rather than take a 30-second musical break, we will just engage one of the questions in the last segment and then we wrap up this conversation. Then we schedule another session because we're getting to 90 minutes. So I really don't want us to exhaust, very well above 90 minutes for this conversation. I want our people to take this in one at a time. So we'll definitely come back to this conversation. But let's take one last very important question. What message does the continued celebration of 11th of February by La République du Cameroon on our land in the guise of Youth Day, what message does it constantly send to the people of the southern Cameroons? Because one would have expected that La République du Cameroon, knowing that the people of the southern Cameroons are very repugnant to this, and perhaps the resolution think different because the masks are falling. Everybody now knows what happened on the 11th of February. It's not that they are trying to live in denial. So, what does the continuous efforts of La République du Cameroon to force these celebrations on our people, what message does it continue to send to the people of the southern Cameroons? We'll begin with you, Comrade Allen. Then we'll come to Prof.
Remember, yeah, remember that French Cameroon is congenital
Okay.
liar. Lying and deceit and fraud, corruption is in their blood. And so when you have a country that lies to this extent, to the point of even denying the day they achieved their own independence, which is 1st January, by decree they said, no, no, let's not celebrate it. They came with a fictitious day and say it is 20th May, and that becomes the national day. Then you know that that kind of country is doomed. What is it in that kind of a country that would be credible? So the world at first was shocked by this kind of attitude. But since it was coming from quote unquote sovereign state, so well, let them do whatever they want to do. But the world knows better. They know that they are fraudulent. They know that look at UN records. It shows 3rd January 1960 is the day of the independence from France. It's there on the record. And they're running away from that. 11th February definitely has nothing to do with French Cameroon at all. Nothing. French Cameroon had no input in it, had no contribution to it. Then they converted around and created something out of it, and then call it, I don't know what they call it today. They used to call it Day of the Youth and Day of whatever thing it is. These guys are perpetually ever telling lies and lies and lies and lies and lies. But until learn to tell the truth, you'll never be free. So, dismissively, I don't think anybody, and they know, anybody thinks credibly about them, the kind of things they come up with, depending upon who happens to be able to sign a decree, what they call a decree. So, no, yeah. Tomorrow will come out another lie. One could go on with different kinds of lies they've been telling or things, and then they change their minds and come out with something else. The problem is the people of that country themselves, they are not critical. They don't even think. They accept the imposition on them. I know a few academics there have questioned this whole thing French Cameroon is doing, running away from 1st January, which is the Independence Day, creating something called 11th February, which is what I don't know what it is they call it nowadays. And they say, look, we cannot currently live this kind of a lie. But to the extent that it's a political imposition from above, and the people of that country have never learned to challenge those kinds of things, that kind of dictatorial imposition. You continue like that, but nobody is fooled. That's my point. I don't think anybody is fooled, the kind of things that are doing, at least not the international community. They are there. The embassies are there in Yaoundé. The UN agencies are there. They know the truth. They know what is on. And they just look at them and they laugh at French Cameroon behind his back.
Comrade Allen?
I think Prophet said it all. When y- y- the part of the reason why the international community operates the way it is because certain precedents, certain respect, certain doorways are given, or priority of doorways, priority locks, let me put it, or priority keys, I would say, are given to sovereign states, right? It doesn't matter if it's a good sovereign state or a bad sovereign state. The whole idea of being a sovereign state gives you certain privileges, okay? And of course, some of those privileges also involves turning a blind eye to certain things that you do, so long as it doesn't ruffle too many feathers, right? I
Correct.
think the story of Cameroon really falls into this category where the international community, you know, and when it comes to football, okay, yes, we talk about Cameroon in certain things. When it comes to music, okay, let them do their thing, and it ends there. Cameroon is not giving us any headaches, so why do we have to get too much, in their business? It's a sovereign state. Bring it back home to 11 February. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because again, education really is a good thing. When we were going to school back in those days, we were marching. Remember, march past, you wear our uniforms and go down the streets and march. 11 February. Barely, hardly any of us really knew the significance of that day per se until we got up, grew up a little bit older. For us, it was just a day to go out of dormitory, go out of campus, have some fun, outing, hang out with your friends. You had a march pass. As you got older, you begin to now realize the significance. And I'm saying this story now, I want to do it in parallel with, let's say, the leadership in Cameroon at that time. Remember, and for many people, this may be maybe way before their time, but late President Ahmad Wahid, upon acquiring that territory of southern Cameroons, I think deep in his heart, he knew that it wasn't really officially his, right? And that's why he played the trick that he played, him and his government at that time, to secure the territory. JMA, I always go back to life as a human being. And you probably ask me, how do I know this, right? If you steal something or you acquire something which is not legally yours, the way you treat it, the way you harness it, the way you know, it's different from when you legitimately own something and you know that it's yours. When you own something and it's yours, and the way you govern and run it and do all that kind of stuff, not you can sleep with your eyes closed because even if the police knock your door the next day, you have the documentation and everything to show that it's yours. But when you take something haphazardly, this idea of, for example, uh, this failed union, there's a part of you that always knows that, or that gives you that guilty trip, and so you do certain things to massage that other person or that other team or that other thing that you took because it's not really yours. Let me bring it out to context. For me, 11 February is that thing, right? Is that little thing that we have used so far, or they have used to give us a sense of quote unquote belonging without necessarily doing it the right way. Or if you mentioned the fact that they don't celebrate their their Independence Day. If they celebrate their Independence Day, it will ruffle feathers. It will remind us of our Independence Day, which is not being celebrated. Which means that it will be a constant. It's like opening a wound over and over and over and over again. So that choice of not celebrating the Independence Day is a deliberate choice because they have to massage this stolen body and to keep it within arm's reach. Now, again, I will tell you this. Had it been, and this is just my observation, the way the Southern Cameroons have been treated under the recent governance regime versus the Ahijo days. Now, I was a young child growing up under Ahijo's days. But I think when you talk to most people, even our parents who have lived in both of those, under both of those regimes, a lot of people, yes, there were certain things that Amaka Ahijo did that people did not necessarily like. But overall, when you look at the governance of how Ahijo governed Southern Cameroonians, a lot of people prefer, even though he was the key corrupt person that did the Mago Mago, we put it for lack of a better word, a lot of people prefer his governance and how they were treated in those days as opposed to current presidency. And when you look at 11 February, if you believe what I'm telling you, you will now understand the whole idea of how 11 February plays out into that luring, that trying to not ruffle feathers and keep Southern Cameroonians or keep Southern Cameroon close by. That is, I think, the whole magic pill of 11 February. Now,
Okay.
given the current administration and given the current way that things are going, that thing, that 11 February value that it had in the 70s and 80s and maybe into the 82, 83, 84, somewhere around there, that value of what it stood for and whatever it was meant to be, I think has lost its. It's like taking a
Okay,
medication,
Comrade Allen, you round
and
up in 30
yeah,
seconds so we can pick up.
yes, it's like taking a medication, right? And after a while, the disease that you're taking the medication for has found a way to counter that medication. And so, what do you have to do? You have to go now and revise the drug in the pharmacy. You have to now go and figure out how do you now. Because yes, that's it. So, 11 February is expired. Now they have to figure out how to revive the 11 February because what it stood for and what it did doesn't work anymore.
That you keep trying to see if you can force it and get it to go. So in fact, by and large, I mean, we find that Republic du Cameroon in efforts to force themselves on the southern Cameroons constantly living in denial, even denial of their own selves. And I mean, you and Bob pointed out clearly. You find a country that can never celebrate its own Independence Day on the day it was independent, then you understand exactly where you were coming from. So we are getting to last remarks on this special broadcast. And the last, I like us to do our last remarks around this question. Prof. Comrade Alem, is there any country in the world that really has been able to lift that very uphill feat of winning independence by by filing a lawsuit through the law courts? Do we have any in mind? And how can that happen?
No, you see, a lawsuit is only one aspect. But you're not going to find a situation where even if you had a lawsuit, the law, the judges are going to declare that that country should be given independence. It never happens. That's why I said in the beginning that the two hurdles, major hurdles by any suit, is the issue of jurisdiction itself and how you frame it. What are you going to ask the court to do? You want independence, so you're asking the court now to declare that you're an independent country, and then that is going to carry weight. No, no, no. I've heard that kind of a thing, and I just said I wish we had an authoritative statement from the relevant UN agencies or quarters. Not something which you get from the information service of the UN. You stay outside, then the library information, but that is a matter of public thing is there. Anybody who had access to the UN information service will find it there. But one would have been much more comfortable on firm grounds if one had an authoritative statement either from the political office of the UN or from the office or legal counsel of the UN. Those, if they had issued a statement and they say something, then that will carry weight. And that might strengthen the case you wish to make before any court. But just to say that you had information from the library or information service of the UN saying that there was no treaty, I'm not sure how far you're going to go with that. So, in any case, like I said earlier, we had tried in two suits in the UK itself, and the two states suits each found at different period, precisely because of this kind of a thing. At the UN Human Rights Committee in Geneva also, there was one there which was brought indirectly by Dinka, and they made it very clear that that would not be appropriate forum for that kind of a thing. They should go to the UN and seek an answer for that. Then we tried getting some lobbyists to try the same thing in the US, and there were two cases. So it's not that one has not tried all of these things. And one thing I must mention also, we also tried the committee, the decolonization committee. Nobody talks about that, interestingly. We went there, we tried a long correspondence with them, and the answer was consistent. The UN has decolonized the British trust territory, the trust territory of British Cameroons.
Oh, Prof, let me get you
And
right. You
Kofi
are
Annan, let me
saying, no,
just finish.
Prof. Yeah, Prof,
Kofi
let me get
Annan
you right.
made the point
Yes, let me get you
that
right. You're saying, because The noise, that's what I'm saying. I just wanted you to be able to explain this that, oh no, people never went there, people went loitered around the corridors. But you actually went, had a session, and did have a written document from the fourth committee on decolonization. Is that correct?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
We
So
went
what
there,
was the content of
and the
that document?
response and the response we got, there's a lot of exchange of correspondence, was that the UN first, the British Cameroon is not listed as one of the countries of the UN trust territory still to be decolonized, because there are still some there. We are still to be decolonized. We are not there. Secondly, they point out that look, um, the UN had decolonized, and I keep on saying this, the trust territory of the British Cameroons, and they have nothing to do about it. And this was reiterated by Kofi Annan when he came to Cameroon, to Yaoundé. He said, look, the United Nations, and he was speaking authoritatively as the Secretary General, the UN has no residual responsibility over the former trust territory of British Cameroons. Those were his statements, very, very clear. So if you want to frame this thing and talk about, say, well, the United Nations did I doubt how far it's going to go. Independence of a trust territory is not granted by the United Nations, it's granted by the administering authority.
Yeah, so that takes us therefore simply put to this notion that political independence of countries is is a fact. It's something that it's something that is more de facto than having to hang on issues that you are saying that you are going to the court, which means that for the people of the Southern Cameroons now, it is incumbent on the people of the Southern Cameroons to get the international system to recognize that we do not want to be with La République du Cameroon, like you pointed out, because when this belligerence drags
Correct.
on, just like it has dragged on in
Correct.
other situations, of course, you end around
Correct.
a negotiations table. And when we are on that negotiations table, an internationally mediated settlement, that is when the issue of the Treaty of Union comes in. Because at that point, you will
Yes.
now be wanting, before international law, for La République du Cameroon to prove its ownership
Yes.
or to justify its
Yes.
presence on our territory, not
Yes.
just by the fact that there was some plebiscite. Because that's when the
Yes.
issue of the non-existence of a treaty of union comes in. I don't know if that makes if that puts it clearer for those who are still
Yes.
in doubt.
That one and the right of self determination.
Yes.
Two things: right of self determination, which must be articulated. And that's very, very important. We're saying we are a people, we have a territory that has been on throughout, well defined boundaries. We have been self governing. The UN Charter directed the Administrative Authority to lead the people to self-government or independence, depending upon the peculiar situation. In 1961,
Of course, the UN
we
actually
had
recognizes
self-government.
those boundaries, as you can
Yeah.
see in that picture here.
And the only thing that left at that point was independence. Notice that the United Nations uses the word independent. They don't say half independent, one quarter independent, whatever. It was just independent was independent, full stop. So when it says, do you wish to achieve independence by joining? It means you wish to be free and then federate with, at the same time, federate with French Cameroon. Those two
Yeah.
things had to take place contemporaneously.
Yeah, Comrade Alem, I don't seem to see you, but I guess I was expecting you to chime in at this point with your remarks
Oh,
on
I'm
what
here.
we just pointed out, and then we get to our concluding statements. Yeah, Comrade
Oh, I'm
Alem?
here. I'm here. Can you see me? I'm here.
Yes,
I just had
we are listening to
my
you.
paper. As Prof was talking, I was taking down the notes, right? And I think this is where we have see, and Jeremy, I think I have to talk to you and some other media outlets. When people get on these media platforms, and I understand why we do this, right? Because some of these individuals have a large following, and again, if you are a shepherd, it's very easy and possible to mislead your sheep. Now, if you listen to what Prof just said, based upon from the point of view of the United Nations, the decolonization process has been completed, right?
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
In terms of view from Southern Cameroonians and Amazonians, it has not been completed. And again, this is where you start working around with terminology.
That's
When the
correct.
United Nations did what they did, right, it was left to Southern Cameroons and the Republic of Cameroon to do their own part, right? And when they do their
Yes.
own part, they start to do with meeting and talking about how they're going to come out with a constitution, finalize that constitution, how they're going to federate, come out with a treaty of union, and then send that document back into the United Nations where it will be filed and stamped as, as a check mark. So, from the point of view of the UN, it's like you, John Barakuro, going to school and they gave you homework to do. It's okay. If you do this homework, you turn in this homework, then we shall now give you your final certificate because if you pass, everything is going to be fine. There's a checklist there. So, according to the United Nations, the instruments or the tools that had to have been done for us to be decolonized have been done. There's nothing extra technical that they have to come and do, right? Now it's for us to have gone our homework, finished, signed off on those documents, and brought that homework for them to file and say, okay, here is the marriage certificate. That part was not done. So you look at it from that perspective, and again, I want to be technical about this because you keep on pointing your hand and saying United Nations, France, Britain. What mistake did Southern Cameroonians do or play in that particular role, right? And whether or not you can, some people say that maybe they were less educated, they were this, that. No, 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 no. Let us own up to what mistakes that we made so that we can correct them moving forward. We don't have control over the United Nations. Heck, we don't even have control over the political rule, but we do have control over our own parts. And again, it goes back to the idea of saying a God ordained struggle. Because had we done our homework and done all this stuff the way it should have been done, it would have been a lot more difficult for us not to do what we're doing. Because now it would have been truly what you would call separatist. Because there is a document that shows Treaty of Union, and for the Treaty of Union to have happened, you have to be a document that shows how we agreed on the federation or the constitution of the two Cameroons coming together. But because there is lack of that, and there's lack of that union, therefore, based on us here, the process was never completed. And because the process was never completed, think about it from the eyes of the United Nations, there's nothing further that needs to be done by them. They already gave the assignment and the homework. That assignment and homework was never done. Now you want to point to that, point to Foncha or point to Ahijo or whatever it is. That they don't care about that. It's in their interest that the country remains as one. We never did that homework part. So this is how I'm trying to clarify it. And if I'm wrong, correct me. This is where the problem lies. So, in the eyes of the United Nations, it's complete and they're done. They are missing one thing right now called a union treaty. It's a document here that is missing, okay, which is true. We all agree on that. But thank God that that document is missing because our struggle now would not have been a liberation struggle. It would have been like in South Sudan, where we're trying to break away, or the Biafra, we're trying to break away. Unlike those two scenarios, we keep on talking about South Sudan and the Biafra. Unlike those two scenarios, we are not trying to break away because there is no union treaty, there's no certificate. We are not trying to divorce. You can only divorce something when you have a certificate that shows that there was a marriage. If I do not have a marriage certificate, I cannot therefore have a divorce certificate. The things have to be done in a particular order. So a divorce certificate is something like, for example, South Sudan, they were looking for a divorce certificate to get out of that union with North Sudan. Countries like the Biafra, they're looking for a divorce. So when you talk about a state breaking away, you are looking for a divorce. Before you have a divorce, you had a marital certificate. In the case of Southern Cameroons, we never did our homework. There is no marital certificate. And so, therefore, we cannot have a divorce certificate, right? Therefore, we cannot break away from something that we did not unite with in the first place. And I think that once we clarify it like this, a lot of people go, aha, that is the aha moment. And
Okay.
this is going now to point out to where our energy needs to be.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
for example,
I think,
somebody
Alan,
like the
you've expressed it very well. But let me just add one. Let me just complete one idea there. I think Alan has made it very clear for most people to see. As in the eyes of the UN, they did their job, they completed. You, South people from the Southern Country, you took over whatever thing it is. That is your business. I manage it. But we are affirming that no, although your claim is complete, it was incomplete. And why do we say so? Because you violated the law of self-determination.
Correct.
The law of self-determination says if you decolonize, you must give the people the three legal options that are available. And that include for the voting the option of separate independence. The United Nations never did that. They suppressed one and gave only two options. You either join
Correct.
Nigeria or you join French Cameroon. So it was a question of just actually like they're dividing. So you go here, you go here. What of independence? Why did they suppress independence? That's where the British come in. The British claim that the territory was never economically viable. But we are saying that is not the concern of the British. Even if we are as poor as a church rat, that is our business, not
I
your
like us
business.
to I like us to
Correct.
conclude around this picture. When you look at this picture, Prof. Comrade Allen, this event, it was in 2010. The United Nations Secretary General at the time was Ban Ki-moon. And this was on the occasion of La République du Cameroon celebrating 50 years of its independence. And this was the present that the United Nations sent to Cameroon. This present was in the form of two maps. One being a map of the southern Cameroons. You can see it with a gentleman holding it on the other side. And the other one being the map of La République du Cameroon as with its boundaries as it achieved independence on the 1st of January 1960. What message could be enshrined in this? Was this not perhaps another way of the UN letting Cameroon know that there is nothing at the United Nations that has merged these two territories into one? Because of course those are international boundaries of the southern Cameroons we see there, international boundaries of La République du Cameroon. I don't know what appreciation we'll give to this particular picture and to the message behind it. That will be in guise of our last remarks on this program.
I think
That
that
to
that
me
picture
would have
says it
been
all.
a source of fruitful research. Why did the UN General Assembly decide to send its president with those two maps? Why? There must have been a reason. It was not innocent. It has never happened. And you could see the body language and the expression on Bia's face. It's like he was shocked. He had never
Yes,
looked
Paul
at a
Biya
map
was
of his
shocked.
own
Comrade
country.
Allen, you can see that Paul Biya was
Yeah,
shocked. Paul Biya
he was
looked
so surprised.
embarrassed and
You know, you see, that's what happens when a person lies and he tells lies. That's what happens. So when they showed him that, he was so shocked. So I believe what is, like I said, the UN or international community, the way they operate, they often say we don't meddle with the internal affairs of any country. But they're showing the truth to him. Say, look, these are two separate entities. This is what you call French Cameroon, which achieved independence on 1st October, 1st January 1960. And this side here is the Southern Cameroon, which you claim as part of our territory. Historically, it's actually not like that, Mr. President. Look at that, two different things. And therefore, if you want to say the two districts should be together, then you should put it on proper grounds, footing. In other words, get them together, sit with you, and you draft a proper treaty. And you can then say, okay, this is what it is. I suspect that was a message. The
obviously,
UN,
because
and
absent a
they don't
treaty
just
of
come together
union,
and say,
those
this is
two
what it
maps
is.
cannot
Do
be
so,
merged.
do so. They don't. They don't. They respect the country that claims to be sovereign. There are many African countries that claim to be sovereign. We know they are not sovereign at all. They are entered state that are beholden to some foreign power. So that is what that thing must have been about. So fortunate that Dr. Tricky is now deceased. If he was still alive and one way to confront him, why did you bring those map there? He contested. That's the only reason. But we did not agree
And
with
you will
anything that
recall,
celebrated
you
included
recall,
that.
Comrade Allen, that George Ewane, who covered this particular event at the presidency at the time, I was still CTV national station. George Ewane was at CTV television. He covered this event and actually reported that these two maps, one is the map of the southern Cameroons with the
Yes,
boundaries at independence, and the other is a map
yes,
of the Republic of Cameroon with its
yes,
boundaries at independence on the 1st of January 1960. And Joshua, when he was
yes,
seriously
yes.
reprimanded, that report was pulled off the air. And to
Yeah.
imagine that this was a present given to Cameroon on the at the time the country was celebrating 50 years of its independence. So obviously,
Yes,
Adam, the United Nations was trying to distinguish to say the one that you are celebrating now is the one on this map. This other
exactly.
map doesn't factor into this 50
Okay,
years
I
that you
was
are
not there at
celebrating
that
right
time when
now.
you had your independence.
And at the
Yes,
United Nations, they don't have a map that depicts Cameroon as we are depicting now. There is no map at the United
yes.
Nations that merges the territory of La République du Cameroon and the territory of the Southern Cameroons. Alan?
Yes, Jamie and Prof. That's why again I'm going to go back to this document, right? So I said before, in the eyes of the UN, this is completed, right? In the eyes, in our eyes,
That was the
by the
claim.
truth, it is not completed, and that's what I'm saying now. But remember that, Prof. The UN cannot also dirty its own hands. And the Cameroon situation is complicated. When they came to give that present of 50 years, had they shown up with one map of Cameroons, they would have been in a lot more hot soup than they are in right now. You know what I'm saying? Because the truth is that that one map in their own archives does not exist. So they would have been going against their own policy. You know, it's one thing, it's like, like when you're a parent, for example, and you are drinking and you tell your child not to drink, but you're drinking, right? When the child is young, you can beat the child and say, hey, did that bimbo, don't do that bimbo. When the child gets older and older, that's not enough to tell them why you can drink and they cannot drink. I'm using that
Yep.
example because in the eyes of the United Nations, right, they made their own error. Don't get me wrong.
Yes.
But they cannot publicly
Yes.
come and display that error. That is why there was
Yes.
no way that the UN, on the celebration of Cameroon, of the Republic of Cameroon's anniversary, come and give them a map of one Cameroon. Somebody will ask you that, okay, on the anniversary of Southern Cameroons, where's their own map? And you have brought a whole host of problems. So what do you do to solve the problem?
Yes.
You either don't bring a map
Yes.
into question, but you're putting somebody's anniversary and you're supposed to be welcoming and saying that happy anniversary. How do you celebrate the anniversary without ruffling feathers? Trust me, this was well thought through. The best way is you show up, you give the person a subtle reminder and say, okay, here, hey, my friend, happy anniversary, da 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 da. But you are giving a subliminal message to that person. Listen, we have some uncompleted work here. You know, we gave you homework in 19X, 19Y, but that homework is not yet complete. But in the meantime, we are going to celebrate your anniversary. It's like telling somebody that, okay, we are congratulating you for winning an election versus we are congratulating you for inauguration. Come on.
Well,
And
thank
they
you very
did
much.
that in tandem with suppressing our people from celebrating 1st October. That's the interesting thing.
Yeah,
They have been killing people, jailing them for celebrating 1st October.
1st of October. Well, thank you very much,
Yes.
gentlemen. Professor Carlson Anyangwe, all the way from South Africa. I'm very delighted you found time to be on this slot today. I know it's really not easy. Comrade Alem, thank you very much for responding at short notice. And perhaps I give you 30 seconds each to say one or two things to the people of the Southern Cameroons who are going into some 3 days of ghost towns. What word of encouragement do you have for our people who are going to be shut down until Wednesday? 30 seconds each. Prof, let's go with you first.
Yeah, let me just say that our people should not waste. You see, I've seen the waste of energy doing the same thing over and over and over. Whereas a simple reading of the relevant literature will show that that ground has already been covered. You can then move on to something else, which perhaps will be much more fruitful. This whole idea of, and we've seen this happen throughout this struggle. We've seen so many messiahs come and then come and go, come and go, come and go. And the reason is because we don't read. I would urge our people to try as much as possible to read the relevant literature. If you have an idea, do a search and find out, has this area been covered? Has someone written on this area? Have there been some finding on this? Then you're going to know where to direct your energies. For example, I would have been much more comfortable if energies had been directed towards the office of the Legal Council of the United Nations and the political office on this issue and get from them an authoritative statement on this. Unfortunately, we didn't do that. We always choose the easy way out, and then, of course, come out and then proclaim victory or whatever thing it is. As for the question of litigation, I mean, people can litigate, but people should never forget that if you go to see any lawyer about litigation, one of the first things I find out that this issue had been litigated before and what had been the outcome. It didn't succeed, why it didn't succeed. Because the lawyer is not going to go on over and over and over, litigated over and over and over, and perhaps rather than success all this thing. But I hear people saying that it's just as simple as that. If you raise 1 million or how many million, you just go and see a lawyer. The
$1
lawyer
million.
will just take to some court, and that court will just listen. That's not how the law operates, and lawyers do not operate like that.
Prof, your time is
What's till
up.
the
Your
end?
time is up. Comrade Alem. Comrade Alem, quickly, 30 seconds. Let's go.
Prof, and to our viewers out there, ever since the beginning of this session, I was pointing to some of the good things and some of the bad things, that our culture brings to the table. And I think as Africans in general, one of the reasons why it was possible to be enslaved was also because of our culture, right? Our culture has some weaknesses where we are very warm, very opening, and we just say calm and we welcome everything we see. But then again, not everybody is treating us well. I'm saying this because, what Prof just said. Um, we have a generation gap. We need to acknowledge it. Unfortunately, our younger generation, do not appears to have lost respect for those who have gone before them. And I think I'm seeing this play out in this particular scenario here. When somebody wakes up and says that I want to do A, B, and C, especially on behalf of a country, on behalf of a territory, right? I think our culture normally would take you back to say, okay, let us consult with the elders, right? Let's consult with those who have gone before us. Let's consult with those who have tried something before us, instead of trying to persist and push it away. And I'm saying this because I want to address especially those who follow people who say these kind of things. I'm not always looking at leaders. No, I want to look at the followers because those are the people who are being misled for the most part. And John, I'm sorry, I have to go a little bit above, but this is very important. Our culture, one of the good things that our culture brings to the table is the idea of respect of seniority. Now, I'm not saying that all our seniors are correct, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying that there is a certain threshold, there's a certain respect that we have in our community where most of the time our elders have been there, done that. We have a saying back at home: what an old person says sitting down, a young man cannot say standing up. You have this bright idea. You just discovered something about in the revolution. I think in terms of how you would do things, the correct thing would be to consult, first of all, A, B, C, and D. Now, to go on a public media space and talk about it as a discovery, and I want to give this young gentleman the benefit of doubt.
You got 15
Yes,
more
maybe,
seconds, Comrade Alem.
yeah. Maybe indeed he did discover that this was the first time he realized this scenario. But then again, what now is the next step? And like Prof is saying, for example, and you can hear how Prof is saying it from experience. Okay, some of these doors have been knocked before. Some of these windows have been opened before. Now, when you hear this kind of thing from someone like Prof, the next logical thing is to, hey, tap Prof and say, okay, when you guys did this and did this, how did it go? How far did you guys go? Maybe you guys went up
Okay.
to 20%. I can now go from 20 to 40. You see, until we
Correct.
Southern Cameroonians begin to work in a collective way and go in a collective direction, it's going to be very, very difficult for our revolution. Back to JMA, your first question about seeing political, psychological, or whatever progress. The more progress we're going to see, it's going to start coming quicker and quicker when we start to collaborate like that. I have an idea right now. I want to go to the White House. Let me find out, has anybody gone to the White House before? What did they say
Okay.
when they went to
Exactly.
the White House? Who did they meet in the White House?
Exactly.
How far did they
Okay.
go? So I now continue from where they left off rather than reinventing the wheel.
Okay, Comrade Alem, thank you very much. And I want to thank you and Prof so much. Thank you so much for your time. And I want to thank the people of the Southern Cameroons, our viewers, those who were part of this broadcast. If you just joined this broadcast today for the first time, or you're on this platform for the first time, please do well to hit on the subscribe button, and of course, make sure to share the link to this communication as much as you can. What we take away from this conversation is that La République du Cameroon, as it were, has demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt that the only language they understand on the ground is blood and iron. But our people are continuing to employ all other kinds of strategy to make sure we get La République du Cameroon out of our territory, and of course be sure that we secure freedom for our people. So thank you very much for your very kind attention, and we will definitely come back to a lot of issues that were not discussed today on this platform, and to make sure our people stay informed, stay edified, stay educated on exactly what is going on our territory. So thank you very much. We will end once more with our friends from Scotland. Keep it up.